So today I'm going to talk about how to stop living lives of quiet desperation. Right, and you may have heard that sentence before. Basically, it comes from a line in a book by Henry Thoreau, who I've mentioned a couple of times recently. Just wrote a game-changing, world-changing book called, let me just check that it's working right, called Walden or Into the Woods. And when I read that book about 10 years ago, when I first read that book, it's a classic from hundreds of years ago, I read that line in the book, and the line is on page 4, and it talks about men. It could be men or women. Oh, I'm on low battery, that's not a good idea. Hold on, stay there. Just before I get stuck into this, just in case I need a bit of... Oh, I'll tell you what, I've got all the gear at the moment. Oh no, trust. Oh, my video pause. Right, back. Right, cool. Back in the game. Anyway, all right, so I read the book, Walden, and in that book, on page 4, is a line that says, men, could be women, but it just is referring to the masculine, but it's men are leading lives of quiet desperation, right? And when I read that 10 years ago, it was like, like a punch almost to the stomach. It took my breath away. It was like... Just reading that one line, that one sentence about people living these lives of quiet desperation, because that was me. And I had no way of articulating it, or I didn't quite understand it, but there was this like growing sort of dark cloud that had been hanging around for a good few years now. And there I read that one line in the book about quiet desperation. I just thought that just sums up what I'm going through. And it also reminded me of a songwriter and singer that I love. He's a folk singer from Ireland. Randomly enough, when I went over to Ireland 25 years ago, I fell in love with Irish music. And there's an Irish singer called Christy Moore, who's basically from the same town as where my wife's from. And he is just brilliant. And he has a song called Quiet Desperation that I can only assume is based around that quote, because that's a really famous quote from Henry Thoreau. And in the song, he talks about quiet desperation coming over me, coming over. I would love to sing it, coming over me, right? Because I can't sing. But that combined with that one line just summed it up. It was a way for me to understand what was sort of going on in my mind, in my brain, in my body. I couldn't figure it out. And then I read that line in Henry Thoreau's book about leading lives of quiet desperation, and then I remembered the song and the verse within the song about this like quiet desperation just coming over me, and it all made sense. I was like, that's me. Why is that? And I think on reflection I know why. It's because at that point 10 years ago I'd spent the previous 10 years fighting and clawing and battling to achieve that traditional material success and career and all those things that we do. So many of us are on that trajectory, and we fight and we battle, and I'd sort of got there. I'd sort of reached that place. I had the car, a wonderful family, beautiful kids, cash in the bank, massive job, and I think there was that sense of gloom of, is this it? Is this what it's all been about? Is this what all the years of effort have been for, to get to this place, only to realise, having arrived there, actually it felt a bit 5 out of 10. And I think that gave me a sense of not having control over my life anymore. And I think that's what it was. On reflection, I couldn't quite articulate this at the time, but I think there was that moment of, what's the point then? Life is just what it is. I've worked so hard to get to this point, and it doesn't feel any different to me. In fact, it feels worse than I could possibly have imagined. And I think I was right on the precipice of giving up, of resigning myself to a life of quiet desperation, this growing sort of gloom that was building around me. And I could sense it. And now I had a way to articulate and think about it because of the book, because of Christy Moore's song. And it was in my conscious. I could look at it. It was a tangible thing that I could start to think about and reflect upon, and start to figure out that it was this lack of control in my life and in my actions that was just building up to this sense of desperation. And I can only say that I just feel so fortunate, so lucky that I came across that book, which is here, and that song at the right moment in my life. And it reminds me of a quote from a wise person: when the student is ready, the teacher will arrive. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear or arrive. And that's exactly what happened for me. And that was 10 years ago. And the path to a sort of a transformation and meaning and purpose, and a million miles away from that quiet desperation that I felt 10 years ago, for me has intrigued me. And that's why I've done a lot of research behind this. I do a lot of reading behind it, because I'm always interested to find out what was going on there. And you constantly see this theme that I talk about loads, of the fall before the rise. It's this ubiquitous theme that you see through all the great literature. The stumble before the rise. It always seems to manifest itself that way. And I think that's what was going on with me. That was my moment. That was my fall. That was where I was in amongst it. Drinking too much, unhappy, unfulfilled, everything strained all around me. Even though outwardly facing, I had what appeared to be everything, inwardly I was really struggling. And that was that moment. That was the fall for me. Before the rise, which has taken, this 10-year journey that I've been on. And I can only think that now, culturally, it's this massive green shoot in amongst all of this struggle and this turmoil. Because very often what you find is the fall is caused by a marriage breakup. It could be a job loss. It could be confinement. It could be an addiction. It could be a problem. It's something earth-shattering enough that it just shakes us from that malaise that we've been in, that quiet desperation that so many of us fall into. And that was my experience. And I've seen that played out so many times through all the, hundreds of thousands of people that have come through One Beer, for example, all the coaching that I do, even the people that I meet who are right now in the most privileged positions you would ever imagine, are leading these lives of quiet desperation. And very often they need something that just shatters the ego to such a point that they're ready to listen anew. They become that student who's ready for the teacher to appear. Right? And that's such an important cultural concept, but for many people never have that experience. So they get stuck. They get stuck living those lives of quiet desperation. That's where I was. I was so close to just resigning myself, just thinking, is what it is. This is life. I just might as well just turn up for the next 30 or 40 years and see what happens. I probably won't be particularly happy, but you know what? There's not a lot I can do. How wrong was I? I was a million miles away from the truth, but I was so close to that resignation. And I think I can see it. I can see it all around me. So many people are stuck. Thoreau was right. He knew what he was talking about. So many people lead these lives of quiet desperation until something comes along and it shakes them out of it. And this is a running theme that I keep coming back to just of late. And again, for most people, it takes form in one of those classic types of moments. But maybe the green shoots from this cultural, planetary experience that we're all having, maybe this is a cultural stumble, a cultural fall that everyone's experiencing at the same time. And in amongst this, right, the debris of this is going to be many of those bigger stumbles and falls, those stumbling stones, such as job losses, such as bereavement, such as like these transformations that are going to happen to us that might gift us the opportunity to think anew, to look at the world a bit differently, to hear a different song, to be ready to listen out and be prepared for that teacher to appear that could be a song, could be a book, could be a mentor, could be a friend. You're ready to think anew, right? To be open to new ideas because you've actually started to realise the trajectory that you were on wasn't actually leading you towards fulfilment and purpose and happiness, for want of a better word. It was actually keeping you stuck in this life of quiet desperation. And there's an extension to that quote that's often quoted. If you read that quote from Thoreau, I don't know where this quote comes from because it's not in the book. In the book it says about men, masses of men leading lives of quiet desperation. But the quote that's often played back is that people are leaving lives of quiet desperation and going to their graves with their songs not sung, or a song still in them. I think I've just butchered that slightly. But you get the idea. That was another, like, real sucker punch. When you read things like that, people go into their grave with their song still in them. And I think that's so true. I think so many people have got these wonderful things to say, these amazing things to offer. You can inspire people. You can, lead people through your actions. And so many people have been caught for too long in these lives of quiet desperation, going to their end with their song unsung. And I think that's incredibly sad. But on the flip side of that, what I think is incredibly beautiful and rewarding and fulfilling is to see people discover that song, right, and then sing it and own it, right? That's what excites me. That's why I do all of this stuff. That's why I created the One Beer movement, the Seneca performance, write the books, because I went through that experience myself, and I sort of love sharing it, because underneath all of this, everything that I do is actually that opportunity to help people maybe hear a different story, and maybe it's the catalyst, like when I read that book or listened to the song, that actually leads them away from these lives of quiet desperation. That's not to say, right, that everyone's leading lives of quiet desperation. Of course they're not, but you get the idea. I think too many people are stuck in this middle lane, doing the same stuff, expecting different results, but always getting the same results that are unhelpful, that are keeping them stuck in patterns that are just making them generally unhappy. Whereas the truth is, you've got so much control. We've got more control than we ever realised, because you control your beliefs, you control everything. Control your beliefs on the inside, you control what you see and how you feel about what's happening on the outside, and therefore the actions that follow. It's that simple. But it takes years to get there, and hard work and practice, but it comes from this little spark. And maybe all the things that I'm putting out there are just a little sparks for people that just get people thinking differently. And then they turn to their own mentors or teachers, whoever they may be. Mine were many and varied. They still are. And they've really all come from books. Whether I was reading Thoreau to Anthony Robbins, to Barbara Fredrickson, Tara Brack, I think that's how you pronounce it, Tim Ferriss, Rich Roll, whoever they are, right? All of these people for me in their books and their podcasts are my mentors, are the teachers that I'm ready to hear, and just gifting myself the space to listen anew and be open to many, many different ideas. Not all of them great ideas, but just listening and taking the bits and refining the bits that resonate with me has allowed me to move away from that place, which on the surface looked incredibly, I guess, successful in many ways, to this new place, which is one full of meaning and purpose that gets me excited about doing this stuff every day. And as soon as I put the phones down and the cameras down, I fire this up again on the One Beer channels to try and inspire people to take a break from alcohol, because I love it. Because I would feel very fortunate to have connected with that song, and I am singing it from the rooftops. And basically that's what I wanted to share with you today anyway. It just popped up in my mind. I was listening to Christy Moore, who I love and adore. So if there's one thing you take away from this, go and check out Christy Moore. His song Quiet Desperation. It's just beautiful. Check out all his other works. Check out this book. It is just the most beautiful book you'll ever read, Walden, by Henry Thoreau. I just adore it. I'm going to reread it over the next couple of days on the back of this, and maybe be ready. Have your ears open, your eyes open, and your heart open. Maybe this current situation is an enforced stumble or an enforced fall that's actually going to gift you the opportunity to be ready as that student for that teacher to appear. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed that. Don't forget, keep showing up. 12 o'clock, midday, every day. I'll be doing my best to impart some wisdom. If you enjoy this, please share it far and wide. The more, the merrier. It's great to see so many of you on here today. Cool.